When fans went searching for updates on some of their favorite craftsmen from a beloved American cable show, they found obituaries. Real obituaries. Names, dates, the whole thing. The men they were searching for were still alive. They'd simply stopped appearing on television, and the internet had drawn its own conclusion. Those men were cast members from Barnwood Builders, a show that ran for 19 seasons on what started as DIY Network and later became Magnolia Network, following a West Virginia crew who salvaged century-old barns and log cabins and turned them into homes. And the story of what actually happened to those cast members, the ones who left, the ones who stayed, the ones who had to watch themselves get buried online, is stranger, sadder, and ultimately more interesting than any obituary. By the time you finish this, you'll understand why this crew stayed together for over a decade, what finally pulled it apart, and why the men on both sides of that divide are doing exactly what you'd expect from people who built their lives around preserving things that were almost gone. It started in a junkyard full of old timber in West Virginia. Mark Bowe wasn't trying to get on television. He was a Glasgow, West Virginia native who'd put himself through West Virginia University, working in a coal mine. A fact he's mentioned more than once as a point of pride, not a punchline. He walked away from that with 2 degrees, a bachelor's in business administration and a master's in safety management. Then he worked as a mine safety technician, an HR director, an insurance agent, and at least a handful of other things before something clicked. In 1995, he helped a friend tear down an old barn. That experience planted something in him. The following year, he launched a company called Antique Cabins and Barns out of Lewisburg, West Virginia. The premise was simple on paper. Find old pioneer-era log structures that would otherwise collapse or get bulldozed. Take them apart the right way, preserve the hand-hewn timber, and give it new life somewhere else. Johnny Jett and Sherman Thompson came aboard around 1998. They weren't strangers to hard work either. Johnny had grown up in Chicago, served in Vietnam, and spent roughly 25 years doing maintenance work before moving to West Virginia in the early 1990s and finding his calling in the craft of old structures. Sherman came from rural Kentucky, the kind of man who'd grown up around this kind of work, who understood what it meant when a building held together using techniques nobody had taught in a century. The 3 of them formed the nucleus of something before there was any show, any network deal, or any audience. They were just working, and for about 15 years, almost nobody outside of Greenbrier County knew they existed. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. The show that would eventually air in millions of American homes started with a stranger walking into Mark Bowe's yard. Bowe was working out of Lewisburg when a man came in asking about a log cabin for a property in upstate New York. He walked through the boneyard, the collection of salvaged timber and reclaimed materials that Mark had been building for years, and he came back genuinely moved by what he saw. Then he revealed who he was, a film producer who had worked with the documentarian Ken Burns. That conversation led to a 20-minute pilot being shot in 2005. It sat on a shelf untouched for nearly 10 years. When DIY Network finally picked it up and Barnwood Builders premiered on November 1, 2013, the crew that appeared on screen had already been working together for the better part of a decade and a half. The authenticity audiences responded to wasn't manufactured for television. It was the residue of 15 years of actual work. What came with the television deal, though, was pressure. Network producers, by multiple accounts, pushed for drama. They wanted conflict, tension, the kind of interpersonal friction that reality television feeds on. Mark Bowe pushed back. He has said openly that he refused to let the show become something it wasn't, that the real personalities of the crew, their humor, their skills, their genuine camaraderie, were enough. That decision shaped everything that followed. It's also the reason the show ran for 19 seasons when most cable reality shows are lucky to reach 5. A crew of 6 good-natured hillbillies, their word, not an insult, traveling the eastern United States to save 150-year-old structures turned out to be more compelling than any manufactured argument. But the cast that walked onto that first episode was not the cast that would still be there at season 18. And the first man to go did so quietly that some fans didn't notice for years. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. Brian Buckner was there from the very beginning. He appeared in season 1 alongside Mark, Johnny, Sherman, and the others. Fans responded to him, a dry sense of humor, an easygoing presence on camera, the kind of guy who made the work feel less like labor and more like an extended hang with friends. He was back for season 2. Then he was gone. The official story, relayed through the show's social media at the time, was straightforward. Brian had moved away from the filming location. Logistics made it impossible to keep him on the crew. But Brian himself, in later interviews, was more candid. Anxiety played a significant role in his decision to leave. The experience of being on television, the attention, the scrutiny, the loss of a private life, had taken something out of him. That honesty didn't circulate as widely as the rumors did. In 2020, an obituary began making the rounds online. The name on it was Brian Buckner. Fans of Barnwood Builders who hadn't seen their favorite craftsman on screen in years feared the worst. The posts multiplied. The concern was real. Brian Buckner was alive and well, and when he found out, he didn't get angry, he got amused. In a YouTube video addressing the situation, he laughed. "Social media is so weird," he said. "Apparently, if you stop being on TV, you're automatically dead." The obituary had been for an entirely different Brian Buckner, a man with no connection to the show whatsoever. He's been living privately ever since, reportedly in North Carolina, not on television, and by all accounts doing exactly what he left to do, live a life that belongs entirely to him. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. Tim Rose was different from the moment he joined the crew. He hadn't come from the world of construction or salvage in the traditional sense. He'd spent 10 years as an Air Force aircraft mechanic before joining Mark Bowe's operation in 2006, years before the cameras ever arrived. That military background shaped him. Precise, capable, adaptable. On the show, he became known as the crew's so-called animal whisperer, the one who handled the snakes and critters that turned up inside old structures. He didn't necessarily love that label. "We work as a unit," he said in a 2016 interview. "We don't feel like anyone is the expert or the boss." He appeared on the show from its 2013 premiere through approximately season 12, somewhere around 2021. Then he wasn't there anymore. No announcement, no emotional on-camera send-off, no social media post thanking the fans. Tim Rose stepped away from Barnwood Builders without making a sound about it. His last recorded Facebook activity had been years before his departure. He gave almost nothing to the internet and asked for nothing back. Various sources have reported that he left to focus on his own business ventures and spend more time with his family. But Tim himself has never confirmed it publicly in any meaningful way. There are no interviews, no videos, no posts explaining his exit. For a show that prided itself on transparency and genuine personality, Tim's disappearance is the one chapter that nobody has fully written. What the comments kept asking was, where did Tim go? And here's the answer they never got. Until now, nobody outside his immediate circle actually knows. He chose invisibility and has maintained it completely. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. Alex Webb came to Barnwood Builders in Season 3, in 2016. He wasn't an original member of the crew, but he didn't take long to become essential. The beard helped. It was iconic before iconic beards were everywhere. The chainsaw work helped more. He arrived with carpentry skills honed across multiple construction jobs and an ability to make the labor look almost effortless. Alongside Tim Rose, he became one of the show's most quoted personalities, the kind of cast member whose absence viewers would feel immediately. In early 2021, something shifted in Alex Webb's life. In January of that year, he married Jessie Michelle. He's spoken about that relationship in direct terms. "When I found Jessie, I found a best friend, a business partner, a wife. But most importantly, I found a godly woman." That clarity of direction, knowing what he was building toward, and why, changed his perspective on what he was doing week to week on a television show. On May 7, 2021, Mark Bowe gathered the crew together on location and told them that Alex would be finishing his last project with them. "He's ready to branch out and have his own thing," Mark said that day. "I don't blame him for wanting to be his own boss." 24 hours later, Alex announced Webb's Joinery and Construction LLC, nicknamed the Chop Shop, on Facebook. Small timber frames, custom furniture, historic structure restoration. His own work, his own name, his own timeline. He left on good terms. That matters. The relationship between Alex and the show, and between Alex and Mark Bowe, has been described consistently as warm. A guest appearance at some point in the future, fans have noted, wouldn't be out of the question. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. The four men who carried Barnwood Builders into Season 18 and beyond are not men the show made. They're men who made the show. Graham Ferguson is the youngest member of the core cast and the one with the most unlikely origin story. He was a self-employed landscaper working out of Summers County, West Virginia, when Mark Bowe called him. Their children went to the same school. Mark had some work he needed done, about a week's worth. The week turned into 3 months, Graham said, and then it just kept going. He showed up in 2013 right before the cameras did, and he's never left. What makes him different from some of the other cast members is that he never had a television identity to protect or release. He just kept building things and let the work define him. Sherman Thompson is the other constant. He's been there since before the show existed, since the late 1990s when he and Johnny Jett and Mark Bowe were running antique cabins and barns out of a sense of purpose rather than a production schedule. In 2021, the crew traveled to Goddard, Kentucky, Sherman's home region. He stood inside a structure he was about to help restore and said, quietly, "I grew up here and have spent a good portion of my life here." That sentence captured what the show is actually about better than anything a network pitch document ever could. And then there's Johnny Jett, 76 years old, Vietnam veteran, folk artist, the oldest working member of the crew. Johnny came to West Virginia from Chicago in the early 1990s, having already spent 25 years as a maintenance worker after returning from the war. He handles heavy machinery with a precision that younger men on the crew openly admire. He also paints Appalachian landscapes, historic barns, rural scenes, available for years through his own website and through the Barnwood Living Shop. His paintings sold for around $70 each and were by all accounts as honest and deliberate as his physical work. At 76, still showing up, still building. That's the detail that gives the whole story its frame. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. The rumors about Brian Buckner turned out to be the first of 2 major waves of online misinformation to hit this cast. The second one targeted Johnny Jett directly. In 2022, an obituary began circulating for a man named Johnny Jett from Houston, Texas. He had died on May 7, 2022, at the age of 62. Fans of Barnwood Builders who searched the name online found that obituary before they found anything else. The panic was immediate. Posts proliferated. The assumption was the worst. Johnny Jett, the cast member, born April 29, 1949 in Chicago, Illinois, 76 years old as of 2025, still appearing on the show, had nothing to do with that obituary. He was and remains alive. But the speed with which both hoaxes spread reveals something uncomfortable about how audiences relate to this kind of show. These men don't have massive social media presences. They don't post daily. Several of them are barely on the internet at all. In an entertainment culture that treats online activity as proof of life, silence gets interpreted as absence, and absence gets interpreted as death. Brian Buckner found that funny, in a dark way. He addressed it directly and laughed. Johnny Jett, true to form, has never publicly acknowledged the rumors at all. He doesn't need to. He shows up and works. That's been his answer to every question anyone has ever asked about him without asking. The show that these men built together over more than a decade, and the bond that kept bringing most of them back even as the cast changed, is the reason those rumors hurt people when they spread. You don't worry that much about a television personality you don't genuinely care about. Here's what the comments kept asking. Is the show over? And here's the answer they never got, until now. Season 18 of Barnwood Builders wrapped on August 29, 2024, with an episode called Gratitude. It was a finale in more ways than one. The crew completed Barnwood Village, a modular housing community built entirely from reclaimed timber, the most ambitious project of their 12-year television run. The episode was framed as a reflection. Friendships built alongside the structures, history preserved alongside the personal bonds between men who'd spent more time together in drafty old barns than at their own kitchen tables. Season 19 followed in 2025. As of now, no Season 20 has been announced, and no cancellation has been made official either. Magnolia Network has shifted considerable attention toward cooking content and lifestyle programming, and longtime fans have made their feelings about that shift known loudly in every comment section the network opens. The posts demanding Barnwood Builders' return have been consistent and loud for years. What's clearer than the show's future is the track record of its cast. Mark Bowe continues to operate Barnwood Living out of White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. The business is real, it employs people, and it has franchised into Texas. Alex Webb builds timber furniture and restores log structures through his own company. Brian Buckner lives privately in the South. Tim Rose is invisible, deliberately. Johnny Jett paints and builds. Sherman Thompson and Graham Ferguson remain in Greenbrier County, doing what they've always done. These men didn't need the television show to exist. The show needed them. And whether Magnolia Network finds a reason to bring them back for a 20th season or not, the work continues. Out of frame, out of the algorithm, out of the reach of any obituary someone posts about a stranger with the same name. The real story of this cast is that most of them were already living the life before the cameras arrived, and they kept living it after the cameras left. The men who remain, Bo, Thompson, Jet, Ferguson, are still in West Virginia, still working with reclaimed timber, still showing up to structures that are one hard winter away from being gone forever. The men who left, Buckner, Rose, Webb, walked away towards something specific, a quieter life, a private life, a business that belongs to them. Nobody left because it fell apart. They left because they were ready for what came next. The question worth sitting with is this. In a television era that rewards loudness, drama, and constant visibility, would you rather watch a crew of men who refuse to